The term biohacking to me is a reflection of being able to manipulate not only yourself but also the environment around you to be conducive to optimal performance and longevity. Like, that's how I look at biohacking.
Lucas Aoun, he has a degree in naturopathy and currently strives to educate and empower people to reach their fullest potential. Our next speaker is followed on social media by some of the biggest names in the biohacking and health space, including Dr. Andrew Huberman, Dave Asprey, Ben Greenfield.
The more lean body mass you have as you age, the lower your chances of various diseases. I actually played around with some of the other medicinal mushrooms, and I had a really negative experience with Reishi mushroom. It's very good for like stress and lowering cortisol and sleep, but it actually completely crushed my...
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the next talk on the Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity podcast. Our next speaker is followed on social media by some of the biggest names in the biohacking and health space, including Dr. Andrew Huberman, Dave Asprey, Ben Greenfield. I actually interviewed Dave Asprey and Ben Greenfield, and in my introduction for Ben Greenfield, I described Ben as having an encyclopedic knowledge and seeming perfect recall. Our next speaker, Lucas Aoun, was on Ben Greenfield's show, and when I watched it, I thought, wow, Lucas has some encyclopedic knowledge and seeming perfect recall also. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Lucas Aoun has played professional soccer, well, I didn't play professionally, but soccer we have in common. As I mentioned, he is in the mind, the leading minds follow. He is the mind, the leading minds follow. He has a degree in naturopathy and currently strives to educate and empower people to reach their fullest potential. Lucas, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Chris, that's a phenomenal introduction, and I'm very excited to be here to showcase my encyclopedic recall.
Excellent. All right. So I found somewhere that you have a nickname, Loxo, if I'm pronouncing that right. Is there a story behind that nickname?
Yeah, that's a really funny one. It's actually sort of Loxo. You can say Loxo. That's how it's pronounced. So that is it's a name that we came up with when I was a lot younger. I was about 12 or 13 years of age. I was actually at my grandparents' house, and my grandparents, they're Lebanese background, and what we call is my grandfather, which is Judu. He would call me. He just couldn't pronounce my name properly, so he'd call me Lux, and it's funny because we were setting up like a user profiles for this game called Halo. I think you'd be familiar with the game, and my brother's like, oh, why don't you call yourself Lux as the Halo character? And then accidentally I slipped and clicked the button O at the end, and it saved the user profile as Loxo. And so ever since then, Chris, like my family, my brother, a lot of people around me, they call me Loxo. So that's pretty much the background behind that.
So really kind of a nickname from your grandfather, right? Like that's what it was born out of. That's very cool. Now, I was kind of expecting you to have a nose strip on today because I've seen a number of your interviews, and you are not sporting the nose strip. Were you wearing that before Alex Hormozi started blowing things up?
Geez, I did know about them a long time ago, and I've used them on and off. I think his content really reinforced it. I'm like, okay, I need to get back on the nasal strip, play around with that again. It's definitely a game changer, particularly in allergy season, like when there's congested nose is a typical occurrence. But at the moment, I'm sort of using it maybe 2 or 3 times a week, mostly before bedtime. But I actually took it off this morning before the interview because I was like, oh, geez, maybe the guest is going to ask me about it again. So,
and he asks anyway. Yes. All right. So you interviewed me back in September of 2021, and I remember you asking me after the interview, so Chris, do you have any advice? I'm just trying to reach more people connect with more people, deliver value to more people. At that time, it was clear to me that you were interested in delivering value to people. In fact, on your Limitless course, one of their testimonials is, Jesus, I should do Australian, but then I'll probably butcher it. Jesus, mate, I haven't felt this good in a very long time, and it's just the beginning. Where did this desire to help and share information come from? Maybe it's your parents. And was there any particular moment that you remember thinking, wow, I'm good and I love helping people?
Yeah, if we look back at my journey, I was very interested in trying to optimize my performance on the soccer field. So every time I'd go to soccer training, I'd ask the other teammates, my other mates, and be like, what did you guys have for breakfast? Do you take any supplements? How do you optimize your sleep? I was very much into the whole biohacking space back then. And I realized a lot of these guys had no idea when it came to nutrition. They had no idea about different supplements. I was taking a bunch of different amazing adaptogenic herbs and really, really powerful supplements like buffer lactic acid. And then I'm like, you know what? If this is just one small cohort of guys that would love to learn about this information, then I have a feeling that there's going to be thousands of other guys out there and other people out there that would love to learn about this information. So that's when I transitioned over into starting the Instagram profile. And I was staying back after university, creating posts, just really obsessed with creating amazing content. And my goal there was to actually, funnily enough, it was actually to showcase to the big players such as Ben Greenfield, Dave Asprey, all those guys who are considered at the top of their game in that health and biohacking space, to get their attention, to say who's this guy from Australia? His content's awesome. So I kept on tagging them in my posts and tagging them in my static. I used to do very in-depth nutrition breakdown and nutritional research. And fortunately, that tactic actually worked, because then they eventually started following me. They started sharing my content. And then the day that I'll never forget, Chris, was when Ben Greenfield invited me onto his podcast. And I was like, this is a dream. It's a dream come true.
That's awesome. So I've got to ask, because in my introduction to Ben, I was I asked the question, how nervous would you be if it's your responsibility to extract, whatever good information from Ben Greenfield? And ultimately, he's so rock solid. I wasn't nervous. I just got to kind of ask some decent questions and get out of the way. How nervous were you going into that particular interview?
Funnily enough, Chris, I was so amped up, and I was so I was just completely it was really early in the morning. I remember it was 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning, and mum and dad were still asleep upstairs. I was still living at home. I was still, just a complete beginner and a youngster in the space. And I remember going into it just feeling I had 5 cups of coffee, but I just felt like I had so much to offer in such a short period of time. And I'm I know I'm going to blow his audience away. I just knew that they're going to froth, what we call, it's a slang that we use here, they're going to froth my content.
That's cool. And I watched the whole interview. There was amazing kind of back and forth, and like I said, it was two guys with, in this case, different encyclopedic knowledge, kind of batting things back and forth. That was really solid. And you talked about optimization for the soccer field. I can tell you, frequently ate Whoppers on the way to games. That was me. So I was not the one optimizing my health and nutrition to play soccer. I actually played soccer with this guy from Sudan who would smoke cigarettes at halftime. So I think it was a different level of soccer where you're actually optimizing the asymptotic scale that goes from, good soccer player to amateur soccer player to professional soccer player. It's just night and day. It's so impressive. So well done there. Now, your father was a pharmacist, and I really have 2 questions, right? First, how much pressure did you have to be a pharmacist? Because I have to imagine there was some there. And then second, how much did the experience of having a pharmacist as a father impact your path that you've been on?
Well, if I look back at it, Chris, I'd say it had a very like positive influence over my decision to actually not follow the same path, and that was because I had a lot of experience understanding and working in my dad's pharmacy from a very young age. So I had a chance to see how medicines were dispensed, how they would deprioritize the vitamin section, how they would deprioritize like certain minerals and magnesium. And I'd look at the supplements and I'm like, what I would do is when I would work in my dad's pharmacy, I would look up these particular supplements on PubMed. So really long time ago, I'd look them up, I'd do the research and I'd be like, how come none of the other pharmacy assistants know about these benefits of these particular like vitamins? Like, see what happens when your vitamin D is in the upper end of the reference range. This is what happens to your risk of developing a severe flu, for example. Or it would be like, this is what happens if you take a big dose of magnesium before bed. It will lower cortisol by like 24%, for example. So I was actually, my dad never said, I want you to become you have to become a pharmacist. He was actually pretty open-minded to the fact that I wanted to study pretty much the exact opposite, which was naturopathy. And I ended up completing that, 4-year naturopathy degree. And towards the end of the degree, I ended up ironically helping my dad get off his medications as a pharmacist and onto the natural medicines.
Wow. So tell a little bit more about that story. Like what was his challenge and how'd you address it? What was addressing it from kind of conventional medicine and what'd you shift it over to?
Yeah. So the exact scenario here was that he was on reflux medications. So acid reflux GORD medications such as Nexium, omeprazole, different other PPIs. And interestingly, I was also prescribed these medications at the age of 16 because I used to get acid reflux and heartburn. And a lot of it was actually due to the fact that I actually didn't have enough like bitters in my diet, and I didn't actually have enough stomach acid. So the reason why I was getting the reflux in the first place was because I actually wasn't producing enough stomach acid. And basically what happened was I showed my dad basically like, here's artichoke extract and here's gentian root extract, both of those herbs in which he had heard of, but he didn't really know much about them. Anyway, I acquired like a high quality source of these particular herbal extracts. I used them for myself and I was completely blown away that I no longer needed my reflux medications. And I'm like, how is this possible? Like what's happening here? And then I gave it to my dad and he's like, yeah, he's like, I haven't needed my Nexium in a week. And so ever since that day, he still hasn't needed his reflux medications.
Man, that's phenomenal. And it's really counterintuitive, right? Your thought process is if acid's coming up, then I've got too much, right? So you got to suppress it. But that's not the problem. It's actually that it's too low, and you've got to fix that. That's kind of cool. Got to feel good to help your dad, also to be on the naturopathy side of a pharmacist and of pharmacology, right? Like that's really cool.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an interesting space to be in, and also like if we reflect back on my way of living back then, I was already pretty much embodying like how a naturopath would prescribe to a patient, like focus on exercise, get high quality sleep, eat well, like all the typical health hacks I was already really implementing. And so for me to like walk into the naturopathy degree and be like, yep, I fully understand this course, like I understand the rationale, the approach, it just made a lot of sense. I honestly loved the course. I really honestly just smashed through it. I'd finished the assignments before the teachers even handed the assignments out. Like, I just loved it.
That's really cool. You're doing the right thing. I love the phrase, if you do what you love, then you never work a day in your life, right? And that it sounds like that's what your right, what your focus of study did for you. Like it wasn't work at all. So I've mentioned we have something in common. We both played soccer. I played for 25 years, got to a semi-professional level. You played professional level. By the way, I have to share this. My wife and I were at the Australia-Denmark game in the World Cup in Qatar, surrounded by Aussies. You guys were the underdogs, and you actually won that match. It was fantastic. Aussie, oi, oi, oi. The whole game. That was awesome. Anyway, you started off focusing on performance optimization because of soccer. I want you to talk a little bit more about some of the things that you did that helped you focus on your soccer career, and really what was the first thing that really made a difference for you?
Yeah, well, interestingly, when I was obsessed with like looking into different supplements and strategies to optimize endurance and like delaying fatigue, anything that could just make playing soccer easier or just like having that upper edge or advantage over my competitors and things like that. So I was very interested in different supplements, and so the one that I received a really strong effect from was actually an antioxidant, which you would know a lot about. It's not C60. Had I known about that, I would have considered that back then, but I was too young and naive. It was actually astaxanthin. If you'd be familiar with that particular antioxidant. So I definitely noticed improvements in endurance and also running performance when I was taking astaxanthin. And I'd do it in a way that I'd basically dose like 4 milligrams of astaxanthin with fish oil with my pre-training meal. And that by itself would be enough for me to notice a really dramatic improvement in my ability to, just like my breathing ability and also just general endurance. So I pretty much, used that for like 2-3 years straight. I then decided to play around with some other like amino acids and things like that. Beta-alanine was another one. Now, beta-alanine I was using as a sort of to buffer lactic acid. You might be familiar with beta-alanine conversion into L-Carnitine. And I noticed improvements in terms of like delaying fatigue in that regard. And then also L-theanine. So I actually used quite a lot of L-theanine, and I'll never forget the best game that I played was actually under the influence of a big dose of L-theanine. And I remember feeling just very like calm and in control, and I felt like, because I was a defender, center back, I just felt like I had I wasn't panicking. I was just very like, I was completely in a flow state, and I'll never forget that game.
Yeah, I remember there's at least one particular game that I remember because it was just an amazing match between two kind of equally matched players. So that sometimes those things stick out. I think you talked about, and this was kind of the focus of how you wrapped up there, that some of the things that you were trying, you really just felt you had that kind of mental focus, that ability to read the game, which is so important. Did you get some of the players on your team to try some stuff, and did they notice, or were they kind of maybe Debbie Downers and doubters, and what did that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question, Chris, because funnily enough, a lot of the other players used to sort of like almost like laugh and mock the things that I would do. So about 80% of the other teammates would be like, what's this guy on about? Like, what's he doing? And then there was like a small cohort of guys who were like, no, like, this is awesome. Like, give it to me. I'll give it a try. Like, yeah, I think it's definitely reflective of the wider population that we live in. There's going to be a very large percentage of people who would look at the things that I post and the things that I do as like complete quackery or like it's placebo, things like that. But then there's like a small percentage of the population who actually understand biology and who actually look at this science and look into detail about, biochemistry, understanding how things impact the body and performance. And that cohort of people are the ones that are like willing to experiment and willing to push their body and test things out. And so, yeah, it's definitely something that I think with people like Dr. Andrew Huberman and Ben Greenfield and Tim Ferriss and like all these big players, the really good thing about what they do is that they actually normalize like biohacking behavior. Like they normalize a lot of the things that we think, like what you and I do, is just complete our normal daily living.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had just jotted this question before as we were talking here. I don't know if you saw a video by Peter Attia, right, who's obviously kind of in the same ballpark, and he did one video just slamming biohacking. I don't know if you saw it. Did you get a chance to see that?
I think he was it on a podcast with Chris Williams?
It may have been. I didn't hear a question. I don't recall hearing a question, so it just sounded like him grabbing the mic and was like, "I'm sick of these biohackers," because he had just seen somebody, and then he went on talking about somebody who had invested, I don't know, we'll call it 40,000. It may have been 400,000 on something, and I'm like, yeah, but you're talking about nasal strips. That's biohacking. You're talking about astaxanthin. That's biohacking. You're talking about just get good sleep. That's biohacking. Like, I felt like he was missing the point. I don't know if you saw that one.
Yeah, fully relate to that. I mean, I can see where you're coming from, and I think what he's like sort of referring to would be like the more there's definitely a scale when it comes to biohacking. There's like the ultra beginner or just the complete noob who just like tries like, I'll delay my coffee intake by 1 hour in the morning, or like I'll wake up and I'll have a look at the sun when I wake up and try and get the sunlight. Then there's like the full end of the spectrum, which is like Brian Johnson, the longevity blueprint, who's just like testing out a bunch of different like really obscure and inaccessible like biohacks that like 99% of the population won't get access to. I think like when I look at the term biohacking, to me is a reflection of being able to like manipulate not only yourself, but also the environment around you to be conducive to optimal performance and longevity. Like that's how I look at biohacking.
Yeah, and so for you, your entree was, hey, how do I optimize soccer performance? And then that's shifted, and I'll probably have a question or two about that. So you already talked about things that did work. Talk about some things that you tried that you were really hopeful. Hey, this is probably going to have a dramatic impact, and just didn't work for you. And some of that's going to be because of N of 1, and some of it's going to be because of maybe it was overhyped.
Yeah, actually, because I loved medicinal mushrooms, I played around with cordyceps, and I had a positive effect from that. But then I thought, I'm like, okay, if cordyceps is a phenomenal mushroom for endurance and energy, why don't I try dabbling with the other mushrooms? So I actually played around with some of the other medicinal mushrooms, and I had a really negative experience with reishi mushroom. And it's very good for like stress and lowering cortisol and sleep. Like I felt extremely calm, but it actually completely crushed my libido. And this was as a young guy. I'm like, that's the last thing you want. And that was because I learned that it was actually a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor. And now if you go on the Reddit / nootropics subreddit, you'll see that there's like literally thousands of other guys that report side effects from reishi mushroom. And what they're complaining about is a similar side effect, which is the 5-alpha reductase inhibition that it displays. So that was like probably an experiment that I learnt the hard way, or the no pun intended, the soft way,
or didn't learn the hard way.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, so I imagine your testing in the beginning, right, was really how did you feel on the pitch, right? How was your focus? How was your stamina? You're doing a lot more testing now, right? It's clear to me. What's the testing that you do regularly?
Yeah, so what I like to do is I try and isolate specific compounds and experiments instead of doing so many different compounds and supplements and nootropics all at once. So I have a pretty extensive level of awareness at this point because I've been doing it for a very long time. So I'm pretty in tune with knowing which supplements affect which parameter of performance, whether that be focus or energy or endurance or anxiety or sleep, different parameters of human performance. And so what I do now, Chris, is I've basically just set up like an Evernote. You familiar with like Evernote?
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically what I do is I've just got like a running log of different experiments so that I can quickly go back and check like how certain compounds affected me. And this is like literally basic things like vitamin D, magnesium, artichoke extract, like different things, and I'll start to log it. The reason why I log it is so that I can revisit it in the future. So there's been certain supplements that I've actually come back to 2 years later, just to get another feel for it, and I have a different approach, a different perspective on it, and I have a new level of understanding around what it does and how it works. And so I think for like the average person listening in, or just somebody who's interested in health optimization, I think if you do some degree of like tracking of your health, that's only going to lead to better quality outcomes, because you've got that level of that baseline level of awareness. It's objective, like you've got that data written down. So definitely recommend doing that.
So one of your courses is kind of I focused on the fact that you, I think, doubled your testosterone, so you measure at certain points have measured testosterone. Is there anything else that you're, blood testing, or is there anything else? Maybe CGM, right? Continuous glucose monitoring, or anything like that?
Yep. So I've gone through, a range of CGM devices. I've used multiple sleep trackers. I do at least 2 extensive blood tests per year. So every 6 months, I like to do a comprehensive blood test, and that'll include things like C-reactive protein, vitamin B12, zinc, homocysteine, iron studies, liver function, kidney function, all of the hormones. So that's, and also fasting insulin, because unfortunately I don't have the best genetics for insulin sensitivity, and my fasting insulin is not where I want it to be. It's sitting at around 6. I'd like to see it less than 5. But yeah, in terms of testing, I've definitely experimented and played around with a range of different tests, and I've done a methylation test as well. I've done, unfortunately, actually, I don't have the MTHFR polymorphism, which a lot of the population do, and that means that I don't really need to be supplementing with high doses of methylfolate.
Have you played around with any biological age tests?
I think I did one from a company that Ryan Smith works for. He used to work for like tailor-made compounding, I think. Was that the biological age versus chronological age? Is that the... Yeah. So there's the 2 that I've taken is My DN Age. That's one of them, which actually might be just a branded version of one of the tests that's out there. And then I also took Glycan Age, which is based on glycans. Yep. I think I did one a long time ago, and I think it showed that I was pretty much on par with my actual age.
Which is disappointing, right? So in my case, My DN Age, the first one when I was 51, showed me to be 59, which I was like not happy about that, right? And then the next time I took it, which was 3 years later, it showed me to be 58. Still older than my age, right? 54 at that time, but moving in the right direction. So, and then Glycan Age had me at like 21. So I don't even know if you want your biological age to be younger. I think it's a fascinating area. When I interviewed Dr. Gundry, he was like, they're whatever. That's it. You can play around with it. I think it has the use not as the quantitative that people are really looking, but the qualitative. So like, are you moving in the right direction relative to your actual chronological age? I think that is, are these protocols that you're, it takes a lot of effort. And frankly, it's sometimes really boring to be a biohacker, to be focused on your health, to be doing those things. And I actually thought this thought came up earlier when you were talking about your mates, some of them interested in your biohacking and some of them not. And then you think about like Ronaldo, like that guy is doing everything that he can possibly do. Has even told his kids, you can't be me, you like donuts, right? He is so hyper focused. And I bet this next generation of kids is going to have a very similar approach that he has.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the high performing athletes, another one is Erling Haaland. I think pretty sure he wears like blue blocking glasses at nighttime. But I think I really love that space, particularly like one of my goals when I first started studying naturopathy was to be like, I want to work with professional athletes and optimize their performance. Like that was like my number one goal. And I was like, all right, let's build this toolkit of all these different tools that we can draw upon to optimize human health. And so, yeah, I'm actually pretty fortunate because I have had the opportunity to work with, Australia's fittest man, James Newbury. He's worked with me one-on-one. I've got a range of actual extremely high profile celebrities that are working with me right now. So yeah, I'm absolutely loving it.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes, send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
That's got to feel good. So, well, speaking of that, right, you're working with clients regularly. What surprises have you had from working with these clients? Maybe things that normally work and did not work with certain clients, or maybe work with you and didn't work with certain clients?
Yeah, probably the most significant effect that I've seen, and this is based upon blood test results, is actually how dramatically high I was able to boost a 40-year-old's testosterone levels. So his name, I won't reveal his name on here, but he started, I was like, I don't know why I'm going to his name.
Let me tell you his name and age and address.
So he started at around 600 nanograms per deciliter total testosterone. And after about 12 weeks, he ended up getting his testosterone above 1200. So he pretty much doubled his testosterone levels. And that was with a range of different biohacks and strategies in which I basically have now distilled down into that trtfree.com course that I developed, which is like everything possible a guy can do to maximize his testosterone levels and avoid making the mistakes that men make when it comes to optimizing their hormones. And so, yeah, that was probably the most impressive effect that I saw based upon blood test results, and he was just completely blown away. I think we actually initially, when we saw the result, Chris, we actually thought there was a mistake, there was an issue in the blood test result, but yeah, so it's pretty phenomenal.
I believe one of your protocols, and you're well known for this, is the icing the balls protocol. Compare and contrast just doing cold plunges, and maybe it's a time thing, maybe it's, compare and contrast those two.
Yeah, so the whole premise of icing the balls, I've definitely popularized that as as a powerful biohack, and it's proven time after time, guys, again, coming to me with their blood test results saying, look what happened to my testosterone after 8 weeks of icing, and we see a 100 to 200 point increase. If we were to compare icing the balls directly versus jumping into an ice bath or doing a cold plunge, I think they would both yield the same positive effect in terms of fertility and testosterone. But I think what makes the icing the balls a lot more easier is the fact that it's, you don't have to submerge your entire body. It's just localized applying of the cooling of the testes, which is all that really matters. All that really matters is that the testes actually drop down a couple of degrees, and you get that strong vasoconstriction that occurs when you ice. And then when you release the ice pack, those following 20 to 30 minutes is when you get new blood flow, new oxygen delivery to the testes, and that's what I believe, stimulates testosterone production.
Do you do any sort of cold plunge, or you mess around with that?
Yeah, a couple of the gyms that I have memberships to, they have like, cold plunge. I use it probably like once a week or so. The reason why I don't do it as often as you'd think is because I feel like it's energetically, it's very stimulating for me when I jump in. Like I get a pretty strong CNS effect. And I think over time, if I keep on doing that, I feel like it releases a lot of adrenaline and a lot of like cortisol. And I find over time it can start to like actually almost like burn me out.
Interesting. Yeah, and you said, icing the balls is certainly much easier than having a cold plunge. I'm in Houston. We get really hot here. In fact, in the summers, it's not even really a cold shower. It's more like an annoying cool shower. I don't know. I think you're in Melbourne, right? How hot does it, like in the middle of the summer, is it? Can you still even get a cold shower?
It's pretty difficult. It's pretty difficult. But I say one of the running jokes that we have is like, because I encourage guys to bring an ice pack in the car on the way to the gym, because, obviously going to lift weights, it's the best pre-workout is like icing your balls. Anyway, I had a few guys who have joked about like packing like frozen peas, like those frozen pea packets, and whacking it under their balls when they're driving. And I'm like, we just joke about like if the police come over and they want to do like a breath test, and they see that there's an ice pack down below, they just laugh, And
put you out of a ticket. I don't know what you're doing, but I don't want to have anything to do with that.
Yeah.
All right. So again, started off focused on performance, right? Sports performance. How much do you think these days about longevity and health span versus that original optimization? And do you kind of project making changes in your focus as you age?
Definitely. There's a couple of biomarkers that I'm like almost like paranoid about seeing go up. One of them is fasting insulin, and also the second one is HbA1c. Again, you would know this inside out as well. You understand the link between having low levels of insulin as you age. That's generally going to be a good thing. And most people, as they age, slowly become more and more insulin resistant. And the fact that I've got, my dad's genetics, who is actually, funnily enough, he's actually type 2 diabetic, although he's actually lean and he exercises and does all the right things. He's actually he's bordering on, his HbA1c is 6.4. And so personally, yeah, if there's a couple of biomarkers that I'm like very much like focused in on, it would be definitely HbA1c, fasting insulin, and then I'm always checking thyroid as well. The reason why I'm always checking thyroid is because I have a tendency to push the limits with certain hormones, and I have pushed the limit a little bit too far with thyroid. Not that I'm taking thyroid, but I've been able to drop my TSH down to 0.64, which is pretty low, and my free T3 is about 6.2, which means that I'm bordering on hyperthyroidism, which is ideally I would like to see most people on the upper end of the reference range. There's nothing worse than being on the other side, which is sluggish, because you'd feel fatigued, you'd constipated, just like losing hair, all those sort of side effects. So probably thyroid, and then of course testosterone. So like making sure testosterone's at the upper end of the reference range.
Yeah, and the classics. What do you think about kind of muscle mass, right? Because one of the challenges, and maybe your father's going through this, is sarcopenia, right? The muscle wasting. What do you think about muscle mass and its ability to kind of help your fasting insulin level?
Yeah, that's a huge component. I think one of the mistakes my dad has made is that he very heavily prioritized aerobic exercise. So he's doing like kayaking, lots of walking, lots of bike, but he never really built a lot of muscle after the age of 40. And I think, as you and I both know, sarcopenia is loss of muscle mass and function with age. And if we focus on maximizing muscle development in those later years, I think it's very clear now that the more lean body mass you have as you age, the lower your chances of various diseases. Like we look at grip strength as like a really important biomarker, and then also we look at things like VO2 max, which Peter Attia has emphasized. But I think in reality, we really need to optimize both. Like, how do we maintain a good amount of lean body mass plus hold a pretty good VO2 max? And I think the best way to achieve that is actually to do a hybrid between aerobic exercise plus the anaerobic resistance exercise or weight training.
Yeah, I recently made a big change, interestingly, because I say this is kind of interesting because I interviewed 55 experts in longevity, and the diet I follow is from a guy who built a business and sold it for $42 million, Alex Hormozi, right? And he's done a couple videos, and it's like, your goal is to get 1 gram of protein in his mind per pound of body mass. And I know that you guys translate things correctly, not incorrectly, like us. But it's a lot, right? It ends up being like 2 pounds of turkey, lean turkey or lean beef, and I'm actually doing some organ meat stuff, but it's a lot. I mean, I've literally walked into my office I've got an office mate, and I'm like, I'm full, and I'm about to eat, another 9 ounces of protein. How do you think about that? Have you kind of played around with higher levels of protein?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a maximum upper limit for the protein intake to maximize the anabolic response to exercise, but then also not flood your body with a shitload of methionine. So that's like the pro aging component of protein. Look, my approach, Chris, is I try and keep it around 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight of protein. That's pretty well established in the literature that suggests that that's the maximum upper limit that you should push it to if you're really trying to optimize muscle growth. There are many, again, there's days where I've had a lot more than that and I haven't felt any different. All I felt is like better satiety and better feeling more satiated. But in terms of, if we look at the balance there, like protein is definitely an important macronutrient that I think a lot of older adults are slowly forgetting, like they just are not recognizing the importance, and that's going to really have an impact on their general health and well-being.
Yeah, I can share. I'm not getting to the 2 pounds, but I'm getting to like 1.2 pounds of whatever lean protein, animal protein, and it really just has been demonstrable. I've been basically doing the same thing for the last 4 years, and the muscle mass that and there may be some accumulative, and so it feels like a growth spurt. But in fact, I was hanging out with one of my soccer buddies the other day, and I told him, I was like, hey, I've just recently put on a lot of muscle mass, and he was just like, screw you, because right, we're the same age, and he is not, right, and I was like, you got to eat more protein, and you got to do resistance training. And I think you're right. This is an adjustment that has been so hard for me, and I have to assume it would be for you, to be in zone 2 in terms of heart rate it feels impossible, and the reason is because when you train as a fairly high level athlete, you're zone 1 because you're resting, and then you're like zone 4 or 5 because you're actually working, right? And anything less than even zone 3 feels like you're not doing anything. But the reality is, and you just really got to hammer this in, if you're in zone 3, if you're doing that kind of the classic aerobic exercise, you're breaking down muscle to accomplish that rate, that pace, and then you've got to rebuild it. Whereas if you're in zone 2, which is a fast walk, right, because of my conditioning, it's a pretty fast walk, or it's an unbelievably leisurely bicycle ride, but then you're actually kind of just burning calories. You're just burning fat. You're not breaking down muscle. And it just starts to really make sense. Like if you're trying to put on muscle, don't break it down and then rebuild it. Like just do some, walking or, or biking. So it's been really hard for me to take. I don't know if you've got any.
I can't believe. I'm just shocked. I'm just blown away that you brought that up, because I literally had this discussion yesterday with one of my two best mates, who one of them is a really high level AFL footballer. Like, he's extremely fit. Like, he's running, I don't know what the equivalent in miles is, but he's running 3 minutes 40 kilometers, like, pace. And he's holding that for 21 kilometers, which is extremely fast.
Wow.
We're having this exact discussion, Chris, which is, when we look at zone 2 cardio, I'm the exact same as you. I'm like, for me, zone 2 cardio, I mean, I could do that all day and it's not exhausting at all. Whereas you look at my assault bike, I've been using the assault bike, which is really exhausting, and I've been pretty much holding a heart rate of about 165 for about 18 minutes, which is pretty high. And then getting up in the round of 178, 184. Sometimes I had mini bouts of that. And I'm just like, I want to get the most amount of adaptations possible in the shortest period of time. So when I say that, that's why I'm going super hard for only 18 minutes. And he was telling me oh, you're better off doing zone 2 for an hour and a half. But I'm like, but I don't have an hour and a half. I just don't.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I think have you? One of the things, and I don't even know how I stumbled upon this. This was years ago. I love sprinting. Right, to just sprint. It feels so youthful. It feels like you're in middle school or whatever. It feels amazing, and it turns out it's one of the higher testosterone producing exercises you can do, like deadlifts and sprinting. And so I absolutely love sprinting. And then you look at Dave Asprey talking about, you need to ramp up to the highest possible heart rate you can possibly get to and then lay down, right? Which we were always told not to do, so I'm not convinced that that's a good strategy, right? You're supposed to cool down after something. But I've actually changed my 20 minutes of jogging to sprints, where I'm doing 6 to 7 sprints and then just walking as slow as possible, and then letting my heart rate get down to the bottom of a zone 2 and then popping it back up. How much of that have you played with that?
Yeah, I'm pretty much identical as well, Chris. I truly do believe that primitive nature of sprinting or very high intensity training at they're short bouts but very high intensity, I truly do think yield some very favorable effects on growth hormone, testosterone, all the beneficial hormones. And if you look at the literature, there's a lot of research indicating that actually it's shorter duration, higher intensity efforts yield more favorable insulin sensitizing effects than longer duration aerobic training. It's well, if I've got a 30-minute window to do exercise, and if I want to try and maximize the adaptations, personally, I'd rather go really hard, because the other thing about that is I definitely get there's a unique endorphin rush that I get from the high intensity HIIT, the really high intensity training versus just a slow jog. It's just a very dramatic difference. So yeah, I'm definitely in line with your approach as well.
And your slow jog is in zone 4, right? At least for me, typically I'm in zone 4, not in 5. So you're breaking down muscle. Ultimately, that's not what you want to be doing. And so yeah, I really have shifted to that, and it's not been easy. Again, and I think just being an athlete, zone 2 doesn't feel like you're doing anything, but I think it's actually a lot more valuable than a lot of people give it credit for. So you are a huge fan of taurine, right? I don't have enough time. I didn't, in preparation for this, to dive down into the rabbit hole of taurine. Convince me that I need to add it to my stack.
Yeah, awesome. So taurine is an amino acid that's ubiquitous in a range of different energy drinks. It's found in Red Bull. The amino acid itself is found in a range of protein sources such as chicken, fish, and meat, things like that. The reason why I'm a big fan of taurine is because it ticks off a lot of different boxes. And what I mean by that is it helps with CNS regulation, so acting as a GABA A agonist, So it's a mild anti-anxiety amino acid. Number 2 is that it helps to lower and block the negative effects of excess glutamate. And glutamate, as you would understand, is a neurotransmitter that if we have very high levels of glutamate, it can lead to neurotoxicity and cell death. If we look at its beneficial effects as a general antioxidant, it can actually accumulate in the testes and act as an antioxidant in the testes against like BPA or plastics and other pollutants and heavy metals. So that's actually, a very beneficial thing. And then if we look at it from like a general heart health perspective, there's a lot of protective effects on the cardiovascular system from taurine supplementation. And if we look at the different dosages, the dosage that I'm pretty much what I had this morning, for example, was I pretty much just have 3 grams every single day. And I've been doing that for like 3-4 years. And my cholesterol levels are always pretty much perfect. My kidney function's always very good. My liver function's always very good. So, I'm a big fan of taurine.
How would you compare, because creatine, actually from somebody pretty close to you, there's a Dr. Brad Stanfield in New Zealand who's got some good content. I ended up interviewing him, and he just doing the deep dive into the preparation for his interview, I was convinced I needed to get creatine back on my diet. How would you compare, contrast creatine and taurine?
Yeah. So creatine definitely has some overlapping benefits alongside, if we compare it to taurine. I would say creatine has better ergogenic effects in terms of, athletic performance and, documented clinical trials on improving like sprint performance in particular. It'd be phenomenal for that. I think creatine, again, it would probably trump taurine in terms of how much money has been spent on research. So I would say my guess would be that they've spent like 10 times the amount on creatine research as they have compared to taurine. But I think if you stack them both together, and if you look at the cost for both of these supplements, it's less than 20 cents per day per serve. Like it's these are low cost interventions that can yield very powerful effects on biology.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll get some taurine ordered here soon. That's pretty cool. And you love it when it's an inexpensive thing to bring into your stack. Man, we're going a little long here, so I want to let's see if there's any other question. Maybe one more before we get into the wrap-up questions, which is there any biohack that's on your radar that you're like either you're desperate, maybe an exaggeration, but you really want to try it, haven't had a chance to try it, and you're excited to try?
It's funny you asked that because I was literally just saying to my girlfriend yesterday that I'm like, I want to try something new. I want to experiment with a new biohack or a new compound. Well, actually, it's I think I will try it. I just need to be more consistent with it. It's actually injectable L-Carnitine. That one there's received a lot of attention recently. I've had a lot of clients that are personally using it and they love it. They say that they feel like their body composition improves dramatically. They get the fat loss effects. They get the endurance, the better pumps. They feel great on it. No real downsides in terms of side effects. If you were to compare oral L-Carnitine supplementation, which is oftentimes used for brain function, I've used it for years on and off. One of the downsides is potentially that it can increase TMAO production because that's why they bash red meat in the media and the news, because it increases TMAO production. But if you go the injectable route, I don't think there's any risk of building up that TMAO metabolite. So it's actually possibly safer than oral supplementation.
And that's subcutaneous, I'm assuming?
I think subcutaneous. Yep.
Okay. Very cool. I have a bunch of other questions, but I think we've given a lot of value. I've extracted a lot of value from your brain. So I've got some wrap-up questions here. All right, Lucas, do you have a target age that you want to live to?
I'd probably say anywhere between 90 to 100.
I like it. 90 to 100. Short and sweet. And how long do you think humans can live?
The maximum age I think a human can live to is around 135.
135. I like it. What 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, and you may have covered them in our conversations today, but let's call them shortcuts to longevity and a long health span can you share?
From longevity, and so two cutting edge approaches, you said?
Well, just protocols, habits, mindsets that you would focus on for longevity and a long health span.
Oh, definitely number of steps per day. That's really important. So aiming for around 15,000 steps per day as a minimum. That's what I think is like the best target. And number 2 would be to try and consistently go to bed at the same time every night.
And if you had to throw in a third?
Third one would be, I'd say minimizing artificial light exposure.
So 2 focused on sleep.
Yeah.
What is 1 to 2 things people get absolutely wrong regarding longevity and a long health span?
I would say downplaying the importance of social connection. That's one that's missed, and we see a lot of like biohackers that are like really like obsessed with like the next supplement, but forgetting about like what it means to actually connect with other humans.
All right, Lucas, how can people contact you?
Yeah, so if they want to get in touch, just visit boostyourbiology.com. You can get in touch with me there. All of my social media handles are on there as well. You can check that out. If they want to personally get in touch with my email, it's Lucas, Lucas, at boostyourbiology.com.
Excellent. And what is something in the near future that you're excited about?
Releasing my own supplement range. That's in the not too distant future, and probably the next 6 months or so.
That's awesome, man. Congratulations ahead of time. I know that's a lot of work. All right, so you can find him at boostyourbiology.com. If you want to email him, that's Lucas, Lucas, at boostyourbiology.com. Lucas, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, no, it was a pleasure chatting, Chris. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.